Welcome back. Okay, so today we are working in our workbooks on page 206. So open up to that. And we've got some practice to start out here, so come around. In 15 through 22, you're just solving the equation. And they've set up these boxes here because you know what they want you to get really, really good at is using that inverse operation. So for example, W minus 3.2 plus blank equals 5.6 plus blank. Well, you've subtracted 3.2, so they want you to write plus 3.2 on both sides and then solve. And all of those problems are the same. Just remember you're using that inverse property. So if they're adding something in the equation, then you need to subtract it. If they're multiplying something, you need to divide. If they're dividing, you need to multiply. All right? And then with these ones, you're just straight solving the equation. And remember what you have to do with these fractions when you have to subtract. And you've got these mixed numbers where the numerator is larger or the fractional part of the mixed number is larger than you borrow. Or you also could convert those into mixed numbers. For example, you could say 9 times 7 is 63 plus 1, so that's 64 ninths, equals 5 times 2 is 10 plus 4, that's 14 fifths. Plus m. Now you're going to want to subtract that from both sides so you get m by itself. So you'll subtract 14 fifths from both sides. So on one side you'll end up with m, but then what do you do in this case where you've got 64 ninths minus 14 fifths? You got to find that common denominator, right, so that you can do that. Okay? And you may need to do those for a few of these. All right, so go ahead and solve those, and then when you're done, look back here and we'll go over the answers. Okay, so for 15, the answer is 8 8/10. For 16, the answer is 6. 17, it's 13.22. 18, 5 31/100ths. 19, 4 14/45. For number 20, it's 1 35/36. Number 21, y equals 32. And number 22, k equals 11 13/56. Okay, so hopefully you did well on those. Go back and check your work. If you missed one, my guess is it's probably a calculation error. So just make sure you get those right. And then let's look at the bottom half of the page. We've got Mr. Marlin buys these tickets for his family to visit the water park. These are the tickets over here. The total cost is $210. Write and solve an equation to find the cost of each ticket. Well, you got to know how many tickets there are, right? Well, here they are over here. There's 4 of them. So set up and solve that equation. And then for number 24, higher order thinking, without solving, so don't actually solve it, tell which equation below has a greater solution. And how do you know that without actually solving it? This is 5/8 m equals 2 3/4, and this is 5/9 m equals 2 3/4. So think about that. Which one is going to have the larger solution and why? And then number 25, make sense and persevere. A high school track team's long jump record is 21 feet, 2 1/4 inches. So that's the record. This year, Tim's best long jump is 20 feet, 9 1/2 inches. So the question is, if long jumps are measured to the nearest 1/4 inch, how much farther must Tim jump to break the record? It's a tricky one. You have to keep the nearest 1/4 inch in mind when you come up with your solution. So work on those 3, pause the video, and when you're done, come back and check your answers. Okay. So for this one, I said 4t equals 210. T is going to equal the cost per ticket, and there are 4 tickets, and the total cost is $210. So then I just solved for T and found that each ticket costs $52.50. Okay. Now, for this one, you will be dividing by these numbers. So whichever is the smaller number will give you the larger solution. It's sort of like saying if you were going to divide 10 by either 4 or 5, which solution is going to be larger, right? Well, 4 is going to go into 10 more times than 5, so 4 would give you the larger answer. Okay? All right. Then for this one, you can tell by my own page that I worked on this a while before I got the answer correct, and it was this nearest quarter inch that was throwing me off. The answer is 5 inches. So when you did all of your calculations, you probably came out with something slightly under 5 inches, some fraction that's slightly under 5 inches. But when you round it to the nearest quarter inch, your answer is 5 inches. Okay, good. Let's look at page 207. All right, make sense and persevere. That's the sign for persevering. Okay. About how many gallons of fuel does it take to move the space shuttle 3 miles from its hangar to the vehicle assembly building? Okay, so you got to look at this graphic here. First of all, we know that 1 mile equals 5,280 feet. And then from this, we can tell that it takes 1 gallon of fuel for the space shuttle to go 2 feet. Okay, so 42 feet takes 1 gallon, and 5,280 feet for 1 mile. How much fuel does it need for 3 miles? So set up that equation and then solve. Number 27. Is the solution of b times 5/6 equals 25 greater or less than 25? How can you tell before computing? So it's asking you to look at this problem and think about it, knowing what you understand about math, about division, and about multiplying by a fraction to answer that question. Okay? All right, number 28. What is the width of a rectangle that has a length of 3/7 feet and an area of 2 feet squared? Write an equation to show your work. So remember the formula for finding the area of a rectangle is base times height, or length times width. So here you've got the length and you've got the area. What's that missing piece? Okay, model with math. Helen is filling the pool shown for her little brother. She can carry 1 7/8 gallons of water for each trip. That's kind of an odd amount. Write and solve an equation to find how many trips Helen needs to make. So this is another one of those ones where the answer is about how many trips, right? Not how many buckets, but how many trips is she going to make? All right, why don't you solve those ones? Pause the video here, solve those, and then come back and check your answer. Okay, so for that first one, this was my equation, and I came out to 377 gallons plus a little more, but not a whole other gallon. Okay? Now, for this one, b times 5/6 equals 25. Is that greater or less than just 25? So, when you solve it, you find that it is greater because you're going to have to divide each side by 5/6. And 5/6 goes into 25 more than 25 times. 5/6 is less than 1, right? So if you say 25 divided by 5/6, you're going to get more than 25 times. It will go into 25 more than 25 times. Okay, so for this one, I said 3/7, which is the length, W, standing for the width, equals 2, because that's the area. And then I had to divide both sides by 3/7, and I came out with 4 2/3 feet squared. Okay, another way to do this would be to, do you remember this from last week? Multiply by the, what's it called? Reciprocal. So you, instead of dividing by 3/7, you also could have multiplied by 7/3. That also would have given you the right answer. Okay, now, after the pool was full, Helen's little brother and his friend splashed G gallons of water out of the pool. Thanks a lot, Helen's little brother. Helen already made like 6 trips to fill the stupid thing up, and then you and your little friend have to go and splash a bunch of water out. Whatever. Okay, there are 7 7/8 gallons still left in the pool. Remember, there had been 10.5 gallons. Write and solve an equation to find how much water was splashed out of the pool. So, oops, you weren't supposed to see that. Solve that and then come back. And now we've got Grace, who solved the equation 2.5y equals 5/8. Her steps for the solution are shown in the table. Here's the table over here, but they're scrambled. So your job for this problem is to unscramble these steps, write them over here in the correct order. I guess Grace doesn't have to do this one because she already did it, so you're off the hook for this one, Grace. Okay, pause the video. And here we're back. Okay, so I said 7 7/8 plus x equals 10.5 for this one. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Miss Williams, why didn't you just say 10.5 minus 7 7/8 equals? Well, you're absolutely right. You could totally do it that way. The reason I did it this way is because this allows me to use a variable, and I want it to be all algebra-y. So, but ultimately, if you got the answer 2 5/8, then you did it right. Okay? All right. Now, Grace, here is the correct order of those steps. The first thing she should have done was 2.5y equals 5/8. Then 5/2 y equals 5/8. Then y equals 5/8 times 2/5. And finally, y equals 10/40 or 1/4. Okay? All right, that is it for today. Check your answers. If you made mistakes, see if you can catch them. If you have questions, you can put them in the comments below, or you can email them to me, or you can bring them to our small group meetings. All right? Thanks, you guys. I'll see you next time. Bye.